Like I said, today we're going to talk about similes, metaphors, and imagery, and the way that those different literary devices can figure into different poems that we're working on. So before we get started, I want to ask, what is a simile? What is a metaphor? So we'll start with simile. That's a slightly easier concept to think about. In your words, tell me what you think a simile is. Very nice. So according to literarydevices.net, simile is a figure of speech that makes a comparison showing similarities between two different things. And a simile makes a comparison that maybe isn't super obvious, but that the reader could understand after hearing it. So one example of a simile could be the shining sun is like a blanket, because blankets are warm. The sunshine is warm. Ideally, we're not really feeling that right now, but hopefully we will soon, as it is almost spring. But maybe at a glance, you're not necessarily thinking about the sun as being like a blanket. The comparison makes sense. You compared the thing using the words like or as. So that's a simile. A metaphor is kind of the opposite of a simile. A metaphor is a figure of speech that makes an implicit, implied, or hidden comparison between two things that are unrelated, but that do share some common characteristics. In other words, a resemblance of two contradictory objects is made based on a single or some common characteristic. So here's an example or a few examples of metaphors. It's raining cats and dogs. Did you ever hear anybody say that when it was raining really hard? It's raining cats and dogs. Cats and dogs aren't really falling out of the sky. What are some examples that you might think of a metaphor? Okay, I like that. Here's another example that I really like. Her dance is a great poem. And maybe some of your poems will end up being great dances. So simile and metaphor, they're meant to compare things. They're both poetic devices that are meant to take two things that are unusual or not commonly connected and connect them. To recap, similes do this using the phrase like or as, and draw attention to the comparison being made as a way to signal to the reader that the poet is in fact making this comparison. Metaphors do this without using like or as, to make the comparison more declarative, forcing the reader to, on their own, figure out why the comparison is being made in the first place. So a good metaphor is like a puzzle that you set for the reader to solve. A simile is a more direct route to making whatever image you're trying to create clear and available to the reader. Both are used to compare things that are typically unlike each other. So before we take a look at the model poem, why don't you guys pull out a sheet of paper, or on your phone, tablet, or computer screens, take a few minutes and try to jot down a few similes and a few different metaphors. Go ahead and pause the video, maybe take like 3 to 5 minutes and try to come up with 5 similes and 5 metaphors, and then we'll check back in with the poem that we're going to be looking at today.